whoever's on the hybrid class, they'll have the same set of notes, so they'll be able to reference when we're talking. So, if you have your notes, you get those out. We're going to start zipping through those pretty quick in this first chapter. And before you know it, we'll be ready for that first test. Y'all are already excited about it, aren't you? No. Okay. Chapter 1, to go through some basic terminologies and kind of give you an idea of what the whole thing's going to be about. We'll give you some sample questions and things like that. Physiology is the study of biological function, or how the body works. That's really what we're emphasizing here, is strictly function. We base everything off of homeostasis. Homeostasis is the steady state or the constant dynamic state of the body. And amazing, I think by the time we get even a few weeks in the semester, and by the end of the semester you'll think, hey, it's a wonder I wake up alive any day, or every day, or whatever day. Then days you feel bad, you start diagnosing yourself. Well, I've got a cold, there's a virus attacking me, stomach virus, flu. And all of a sudden we become doctors, So maybe this will help you become a little more of a doctor. And probably the only thing keeping us from being a doctor is a license, because we could kill as many people as doctors, couldn't we? I mean, that's probably your most lethal thing out there is a doctor. If you look at the stats, they kill more people in car accidents, and sure enough, kill more people than guns. So anyway, the whole idea of this is to grasp an understanding of how the body's working. So kind of a little clause or a phrase or a motto we go by in here: cause and effect and try to correct. Cause and effect and try to correct. So we find the cause, what's the effect, how to correct. Cause and effect and how to correct, or try to correct, however you want to put that. So to be able to do that, I mean, it sounds like a doctor, doesn't it? What's the problem? How are we going to fix it? So we have to develop that mentality. So my job is to train you to think like me.
That's scary.
I thought I'd scare some of you. So in our organizational process, we go from atoms, molecules, cells, tissues, organs, and systems. And that's kind of how the book's even designed as we go through the book. We're going to start by looking at some atoms and molecules, a little bit of chemistry here at the beginning, and we'll be in cells and tissues and all. That's kind of the first test. We're going to spend the rest of the time on organs and systems. So, pathophysiology is concerned with how physiological processes are altered in disease or injury. You can't talk about human physiology without talking about pathophysiology. And to me, the pathophysiology is the more interesting aspect of this. And there's lots of little boxes in your book, and they make little side notes, and there's a lot of them we'll refer to, and we'll probably talk about some that's not even mentioned in the book. But probably, are we not concerned about disease and whether it be autoimmune disease or a new illness that we've discovered? I mean, do we not run into something like that every day? All the time. So this right here is really what makes physiology a young science. And we can almost change it to say it's a continuously growing science, because we'll never have an end to physiology. Well, it's constant.
Cancer still hasn't been cured.
Not sure it ever will. There was a book written, it was back in the 80s, it was written on treatments of cancer. And it talks about the way we treat cancer, which is basically three major ways: radiation, chemotherapy, and surgery. And the book was talking about, they were predicting here in the 2000s that we would look back and laugh at the ways that we killed people with those three ways of curing. What are we still doing today? Same thing. We haven't progressed. There's certain cancers we progressed pretty well on, we're pretty good at. Thyroid cancer, we're pretty successful with it. We catch it early enough, and early detection is a big one with all of them. We can take and remove the thyroid gland surgically, so there's your surgery end of it, but you're not going to scrape every little bitty cell out of there. But we do know the thyroid's the only gland of the body that requires iodine. So we go about 3 to 4 weeks and allow thyroid stimulating hormone to increase in the body. When it increases to a certain limit, and they'll test it by blood test, then we add radioactive iodine into the system, which the thyroid stimulating hormone guides the iodine to the only cells left in the body that requires iodine, and those few cells we missed with surgery, and the radioactivity of it kills them. We're done. Then we give the person thyroxine as a medical supplement, as a pill, and you live happily ever after. That's the whole idea. That don't always come out that smooth, for sure. So pathophysiology is going to be a big component of this. Let me get into the scientific method. The scientific method, I make it the same in every class. So if you've had my Zoe, then you've heard this before. We have observation. You go observe a situation so you know something about it so you can make a statement about it. That's all it is. Observe, observe, observe. And then you make your statement. Well, I think it's going to do this all the time. So we call it an educated guess because you observed it enough that you have an idea this is what it's going to do. Now, in zoology, we made us a little smarter here, didn't we? Because instead of saying educated guess, it rolls off the tongue better if we call it a tentative speculation. So you'll leave today smarter than you come in, not knowing that much more, but the way you word things is, man, that person's intelligent. Did you hear the way that rolled off their tongue? It's a tentative speculation. Then you go back and observe some more and make sure it is doing what you think it's going to do, or what's happening is what's going to happen. And now we can create a theory, and the theory is supported by massive amounts of evidence from these observations and from actually dealing with it or doing experiments with it or whatever it may be. We actually do this kind of stuff all the time. We just don't think about it. You got a squeak in your car. You go through this process in your head trying to figure out what that squeak is that's driving you crazy. And your theory may be right and it may be wrong, but the people that are right and make a theory out of it, they probably have dealt with it before. A mechanic could create this and be more accurate than a layperson, right? The law down here really doesn't pertain to any of the natural science classes because the laws are typically in physical science, such as law of gravity, and it's Kepler's laws, not Kepler, and then Newton's laws. Those laws do affect natural science, but you won't see natural science, scientific method, reaching a law state because we're in constant change. The term change is in reference to a bigger term that we run into a lot called evolution. And if we just put a definition of evolution, it is the ability to change or adapt. And if an animal can't change or adapt to their certain situation and dies, they don't continue the species there, do they? So we have to be able to do that. In natural science, that's why I sit up here and teach you theory. I teach you all these things that we have learned, yet for you to wake up tomorrow and think, I paid for that class, and that's not even true anymore, because it could change tomorrow. And we'll mention some things that once was and now is something else. So it changes. So we learn this to build our knowledge, to learn something new when we're out in the workforce. Make sense? Have to pay for something that'll become obsolete. Well, you buy computers all the time, so there you go. Look at some physiology history. Oh, Claude Bernard, he observed a steady internal state. This steady internal state, internal environment, he found it to be quite remarkable that it could stay within this normal realm this long. And so he became known because of this, the father of modern physiology. Now this steady internal state really didn't have a name until Walter Cannon came along and he gave it the name homeostasis. So those two guys usually show up on your first test just for a little history of how this stuff came about. And it defined it the same way, internal constancy or dynamic state. And we'll find that we have set points throughout the body. For instance, blood pH, our normal neutral blood pH is 7.4. We can live within a range of 7.35 to 7.45. We get outside that range, we're either acidic or more basic or alkaline. And the body starts making adjustments to keep it in that realm. And you think, well, that's not a big realm. And anytime you drink something acidic, is coffee acidic? Y'all drink coffee? Is orange juice acidic? Absolutely. I drink gallons of orange juice. I love orange juice. And yet, our blood pH stays within that realm. So, we'll find out what does that as we go through this book. So we have these set points that's monitored by integrating centers, which increase or decrease the activity of a particular effector. Effectors are usually muscles and glands. So if we're down below that pH, and one of our monitors pick it up, it'll send a message somewhere else to make that adjustment to get it back. It's really no more than a thermostat over there. We set the thermostat at 70 degrees. It usually has 1 to 2 degrees to play with. A lot of them just has a 2-degree temperature moderation there. We drop down 2 degrees, heat kicks on, heats it back up to 71 or 2, cuts off, and tries to hold it there as long as it can. If it gets above it in the summertime, we cool it down to where we want it. So that's the way our body works. So the effectors are either muscles or glands, and here's the blood pH example. So our body's working off negative feedback. Now, most of our cases are negative feedback. If it gets too high, we do something to oppose it and lower it. If it gets too low, we do something to oppose it, to increase it. That's negative. Positive feedback is when it's getting too high and we add to it and it gets higher. Or it gets too low and we add to it and it gets lower. There are some positive feedback situations in the body. And the two that comes off the top of my head are both in the female body. One is during childbirth, you have an increase of oxytocin, which causes stronger uterine contractions. Stronger contractions require more oxytocin for stronger contractions. So we get more. That's a positive feedback reaction. So in a positive feedback, it's increase or decrease. We're going in the same direction. Yeah. Yes, and I will have a test question on there that has increase, decrease. Will be your choices. If it's going in the same direction, it's positive. If it's opposing, it's negative. So increase, or decrease is negative. Agree? Increase or decrease, going in the same direction, it's positive. It's that simple. I can sit up here and rattle that stuff back and forth, try to create confusion, but it's as simple as if it's the same words, it's positive. If it's different words, it's negative. That's as simple as it gets. And I use a thermostat here as another example. So positive feedback tends to be an amplification. We keep going in the direction that we're already headed. This is another positive feedback reaction right here. Increase in estrogen causes surge of LH, which causes ovulation, again in the female cycle. Two categories that tend to play the biggest role in homeostasis. You have nervous system and the endocrine system. Neural and endocrine. The difference is the nervous system tends to react fast. If you sit down on something that hurt when you sit down on it, you reacted real fast and got up. And then when the pain kind of subsides and goes away, if the neural system, if the endocrine system needed to come in and play a role, it would come in later and it would last a little longer. Nervous system's fast but doesn't last. Endocrine system's slow but will last much longer. That's the two differences. They fill each other's void is what they do. And they are the biggest component of overall homeostasis. Brings us to intrinsic and extrinsic. The term intrinsic is in reference to internal. And we're going to use it in reference to internal to the individual systems or even individual organs. And whether it's chapter 15, we talk about immunity. Well, individual systems and individual organs have their own built-in immunity. And we have outside immunity that can come in and help if we need to. That's extrinsic. So as long as an organ is taking care of itself, it don't need outside help. But if you're looking at it from the immunity standpoint, let's say we have an infection in a certain organ, and that organ cannot completely take care of that infection. Then it opens up the doors to bring in other white blood cells that circulate the system all the time anyway. You can almost look at it like there's the police in Worcester, Oklahoma take care of the everyday mundane problems. But all of a sudden we've got a major bomb threat at the school, then what happens? We've got OSBI, FBI, you name it, and everybody else floods in there to try to help take care of this problem. It becomes big, so we bring in more. Now, that's one way to look at it, is from the immunity side of it. And the other ways to look at it is in the nervous system side of it. If it's functioning on its own, doing the right thing, it's fine. Take the heart, for instance. It beats 70 beats a minute, hopefully for 70 years, and you're doing fine. Now, if you ever get excited or go exercise, will 70 beats a minute sustain your exercise? No. So we get outside influence that says, well, let's up the heart rate a little bit so they don't kill over. And so the outside influences increases heart rate. You get more blood supply, you make it through the exercise, then we go back down. And so chapter 9 deals with a lot of that, sympathetic, parasympathetic responses. So that's intrinsic and extrinsic. If we need outside influence, it typically comes from nervous and endocrine. Inside influence maintains pretty much across the line, everyday, mundane activities. But if you need to increase or decrease, outside influence usually plays a role. And sometimes outside influence plays too much of a role. And in digestion, in some cases, they'll actually sever the vagus nerve for digestion and let your stomach do its normal thing, and it actually gets back more to normal than vagus nerve choking it out, because it's making it do things it shouldn't be doing. So they call that vagotomy. 4 primary tissues: muscle, nervous, epithelial, and connective. Now, for an organ to be an organ, you need at least 2 of these. Most all of your organs have all 4. Most of them. Very few exceptions. But for an organ to be an organ, it needs at least 2. So we'll start, and this is kind of a lab review. When we get into our first lab, this is going to be a lot of what we're talking about in the first lab. The first category is muscle. We'll have slides, we'll look at smooth and skeletal and cardiac muscle. Then I'm going to ask you, where do you find it? What does it do? I mean, what's its purpose? There's going to be follow-up questions to those identifying features. Smooth muscle is the first one. It's involuntary. I'll probably ask you that. Is it voluntary or involuntary? You got a multiple choice there. It's involuntary. Where do you find smooth muscle? Surrounding digestive tract, respiratory tract, vessels. It's involuntary because we don't consciously think and tell our left carotid artery to constrict or to dilate. Those things happen on their own. When we swallow food, we don't have to consciously sit there and think. We need to contract and move that food down the digestive tract. We never would get anything done. As much as I eat, I'd just be sitting around thinking about moving food down the system. That'd be awful. So it's involuntary. It's not striated, that's why they call it smooth. And there's where you find it: vessels, digestive tract, respiratory system. It's very slow and it lasts a long time. Smooth muscle is very slow contracting, and food is a good example of that. If it was very fast contracting, then we probably wouldn't get much out of that food. It'd go through the system so fast, it's like reach over and slap somebody. What'd you do with my food? I mean, you didn't even know you ate it. Or even the worst case scenario, you'd have to eat sitting on the pot. That'd be awful, wouldn't it? Man, I'm just not getting much out. Bring me some more food. Sitting in there, just go right through you. It better be slow. We need to get something out of that, right? Skeletal muscle is voluntary. This makes up 40% of your body mass, and It's what you're using to write with right now. Move your arms around with. So that's the biggest bulk. My favorite example of skeletal muscle, which is always a lab question, so don't forget this one, is your tongue. Because it's skeletal muscle, you're supposed to be able to control it. Yeah, that cut like a knife, didn't it? It's skeletal muscle that tends to just fly off the hammer on its own a lot of times. No comment, Kelsey? She's over here biting her tongue right now. It should be controllable. It's quick, strong, but it doesn't last. So a good example of skeletal muscle, if we pick up something heavy, and we're going to carry it from here to over there. I mean, it's really heavy. You can get it lifted up, but can you carry it all that direction or all that distance? Maybe, maybe not. If you don't, you go a little ways and set it down, and you let your muscles rest, build their energy back up. Here we go again. Skeletal muscle works upon demand. If you have a lot of fibers that's been told that they need to be prepared to do a lot of work, then you can probably pick up more weight and carry it longer. If you have some fibers that's been doing some work, then that's your limit. Now, to pick up a notebook, carry it around, it may use, so let's say it uses 3 fibers to pick up that notebook, carry it around. You think those 3 fibers ever get tired? They do, actually. But when they get tired, they recruit 3 other ones. And they're resting while these 3 are working. When they get tired, they recruit 3 other ones. When they're working, everything else is resting. We just go around. We can carry that notebook around for a long time, can't we? But if it's something really heavy and we utilize all our fibers at once to pick it up and move it, we don't have any other choice than to set it down and let all your fibers rest and then pick it up and go again. We can't recruit anything we don't have. So that's how skeletal muscle works. And then we get into cardiac muscle, which is also involuntary, and that's good news for most of us. If we had to sit around and think about our heartbeat and 70 beats a minute, we'd all be dead because we're too busy. We gotta go through McDonald's and get us a Big Mac so we can clog our heart up. That's what we're thinking. So it is involuntary, it is striated, rhythmic beating, 70 beats a minute, 365 days, some 75 years, and I forgot what my data says, 36,792,000 times a year. I think that's what that comes out to. In case you just, somebody put a calculator to it one day. 100,000, let's see, 100,000, how is that? I can't even, I'm glad I'm not in the math department. But I think that's per month and that's per year, I think is what that is. 1,800,000, is that what it is? There we go. Okay, the last one, the heart muscle, is a little bit unique in that it has synctium and intercalated disc, and it allows the muscle to contract smoothly. A lot of contractions in muscle is herky-jerky. The skeletal muscle can't be herky-jerky like, cardiac muscle cannot be herky-jerky like skeletal muscle. So what happens when electrical current flows, it flows smoothly throughout it instead of jumping throughout it. Most of our nervous system, it's jumping. When we get to chapter 7, 8, and 9, we'll see how the current jumps from node of Ranger to node of Ranger, speeding the conduction up to get things done. In cardiac muscle, we've got to be rhythmic, we've got to be smooth, we can't be herky-jerky. And so the synctium and intercalated disc allows for a smooth, even flow through all the cells equivalently instead of just jumping around. That would create a lot of chaos. And when it does start jumping around, usually somebody wants to hook you up to some electricity and fix that, don't they? Bring us to the nervous system. As far as looking at a slide in lab, I don't know that we have an actual slide that we'll look at, but I probably will ask you something about a neuron being the functional unit of the nervous system. I may ask you the 3 major parts of the neuron. Chapter 7, 8, and 9, we'll talk about even more parts than that. cell body, dendrite, and axons, your three major parts. And I believe in chapter 7 we'll talk about several different kinds of support cells called glial cells or neuroglia. There are some found in the central nervous system, there's some found in the peripheral nervous system. I think there's six or seven of those total. And they have all their little different quirks and things that they do. But the thing you might want to remember about neuroglia or glial cells, they're the only ones, the only cell in the nervous system capable of mitotic division. So if they're capable of mitotic division and somebody has cancer in the nervous system, a cancerous tumor or whatever, one of these cells are to blame because cancer itself is mitosis out of control somewhere in the body. And there's a little bit said about that in one of these chapters as far as some of the research they've done on that. They found some different genes in the cell. I think there's a P53 and a P21 gene they've identified. And what those genes ultimately control is the little hormones in the cell that triggers mitosis. I believe they're called cyclins. So what they did in the research is took radiation and bombarded the cell, killed the P53 gene, which destroyed the cyclin. Without cyclins to control turning on and off the gene for mitosis, they had cancer in every laboratory animal that they did that to. And then they discovered that P21 was connected to P53, so they went back and killed it by itself, well then that created cancer. So if either or both were destroyed, they had automatic cancer in every animal. We have to have both those genes in place to regulate the cyclins. If the cyclins are regulated properly, then mitosis occurs properly, and cancer does not occur. Now it's nice to know, but if you can't fix it, what good is it? Gives us something else to worry about, I guess. Or, it's a starting point for somebody else's research, maybe. That's kind of the research they did on that. Then we come to tissue number 3, epithelial. Protection is probably the number one thing I would say about it. I'll ask you that in the lab probably. What's its purpose? Protect. Where do you find it? You find it lining vessels, lining cavities. It makes up most of your glands. In fact, there's only 2 glands it does not make up. And there'll be a lab question at some point that'll ask you that. It'll ask you what 2 glands is made of nerve tissue, I think is what it's going to ask you. And it's not the first lab, but it's a couple labs on down the road. And the 2 glands, names give them away. The posterior pituitary, and you think, well, posterior pituitary, that means nothing to me. But the technical term for posterior pituitary is the neurohypophysis. Neuro is in reference to nerve tissue. So that's one of them, not made of epithelial, but made of nerve tissue. And the other one is a no-brainer. The adrenal medulla. There's another brain name. So there's your second one, made of nerve tissue. Everything else, all other glands in the body, is made of epithelial tissue.
Can you say the first one again?
Neurohypophysis.
So it'll be under neural hypothesis, not the posterior.
They use reference to both in the book. Both those names are in the book. They may say posterior pituitary and then they name it the neurohypophysis down underneath. But now that you have in your notes, you've answered that lab question when we get to it. When you get to it, say, oh, I remember. Then you'll search for 3 weeks in your notes to try to find that. But it's there now. And the thing about science, anybody had medical terminology? It will help you in this class and any other science class, just to know what it means. You know, just goofy stuff like that will make a difference in ciphering out what in the world is this monster word that, you know, they come up with words, who knows where it comes from. And then they come up with words and, you know, that's pretty significant. Why couldn't you come up with a big word for that one, you know? But none of it seems to make any sense, but it's Latin. Could be pig Latin to us, or it's over with, but it's Latin. All right, so two different types of glands here. We have endocrine gland, which secretes directly into the bloodstream. Name an endocrine gland. You know, in a roundabout way, the kidneys do secrete things. I don't know if the kidneys are listed as a gland, but you couldn't be totally wrong there. Because they do secrete, there's parts of the kidney that secretes this directly in the bloodstream, it goes and attacks this, it does this, and it's crazy. But I don't know that it's actually listed as a gland, but you've got an argument going on there. Anything else? Secrete, a gland that secretes directly to the bloodstream.
My brain's thinking.
Think big.
What's the one that does the insulin? It's got
The pancreas?
Yeah.
Pancreas is one of my favorites because it is, in this category, it's dual purpose. Because it produces insulin and glucagon directly into the bloodstream to control blood sugar levels, but it produces digestive hormones or digestive secretions through the pancreatic duct into the small intestine to digest nearly every type of food we eat. So it covers both definitions. Exocrine secretes through ducts and endocrine directly to the bloodstream. Another dual purpose is liver, testes, ovaries. So, you know, there's a menagerie of glands out there for sure. A real simple exocrine gland would simply be sweat glands. It secretes through ducts that extends to the surface, which puts moisture on a surface to allow for evaporative cooling and cools the exterior of the body. All right, some examples of epithelial down here. We have simple squamous. We'll look at that one in lab. In fact, I don't know if we'll have time or not. If you had my Zoe, we actually stained one of those. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And they actually, what we stain is better than what we'll look at for this test. I think it represents it better. So that one's pretty easy. It's a single flat, it looks like, well, the stain we use is blue, so, but it looks like a kind of a blue highlighted fried egg. So it's kind of what, it's pretty simple. Now, the picture we're gonna look at, there's so many of them that they're overlapped. It's kind of mass production. You'll see a lot of nuclei, and they use a couple different stains. I think one of them's safranin or something like that. Yeah, it's probably more safranin than carbofusion. But anyway, we'll get it picked out. Cuboidal's another one. And cuboidal, when we look at it, they're actually taking cross sections of kidney tubules to show us these. And the kidney tubules are round. And you'll see this big round tubule, a cross section of it. And here's the cuboidal epithelial that lines it. And they're square. And some people says these things look like blueberry donuts. It looks like a donut, but you say, well, there's nothing square about that. You're not looking at the whole thing. You're looking at these individuals. They are square. That's your cuboidal epithelial. So on a lab test, I'll lay that picture up there, and you'll say, well, that's cuboidal epithelial. And then I'll ask you, well, what shape would this tend to have? Some people miss this because they say, well, it's round. Hello, look at the name. It's cube shaped. Okay, so some of my questions say, oh, that's too easy. He's trying to trick us. So you trick yourself thinking I'm trying to trick you. Don't do that. So cuboidal is cube shaped. Columnar is column shaped. We're starting to catch on. Question?
Can you explain what exactly the simple squamous is, like location or like
Oh,
what
yeah.
it does?
Location of simple squamous would be lining vessels, lining cavities. When we stain that in zoology lab, we take a toothpick and scrape the inside of our cheek. So it's like the initial layer of cells in a lot of areas of the body. And we lose those things right in lab. They're replaced constantly.
And where does the rest of that come in with the simple squamous?
These are, simple squamous is one kind. This is another kind. This is another kind.
And those are all in different locations?
Yes. Cuboidal, we said in kidney tubules, is a very common place. Columnar, respiratory tract, and digestive tract, you'll find columnar. And they are just what, I mean, when we look at the picture, there'll be a bunch of just tall cells stacked up. Just like that. They look like big tall columns. Now, we'll say this, a lot of columnar cells are associated with what's called goblet cells, especially in the respiratory tract. And the purpose of goblet cells is to secrete mucus. So, you get, anybody ever accidentally swallow a bug? Suck down a fly? If you haven't and you've not lived, you need to get out more. Because that'll create some mucus after you hack and cough for about 30 minutes to 3 days. And you finally hack it up in this big pile of mucus. You're going to want to know what kind of bug that is. So you spit it out and you don't dig it through it. If you don't ever get it coughed up, just think, well, that was extra protein. Your stomach will probably kill off any major bacteria it had attached to it, which I'm sure it had some. If it was a fly, don't tell me something dead it had been playing with. It's pretty disgusting. But we've all done it at some point. Of course, they say what we eat like 9 spiders in our life because we're mouth breathers. Yeah. Well, there went one in. There it went out. There it went in.
I've never eaten a spider.
You'll eat a spider before a fly?
I've never ate a spider.
Not that you know of.
No.
They crawl in your mouth and
I would
sleep.
know if I was eating
You ever
a
have a little
spider.
tickle in your throat at night?
Sometimes you agree.
Well, that wasn't just a cough. That was. Then your throat swells up the next morning. That was a black widow or a brown recluse that bit you on the way down. So then you see these little blisters on the back of the throat. Yeah, they diagnosed those wrong. Those are spider bites. Something, boy, you'll take your mouth shut sleeping at night. You'll go off straight for the nose. All right, so stratified. Now, stratified can associate to some of these. It really associates to simple squamous because stratified is going to be multi-layered. You're going to find stratified epithelial. If we take simple squamous and fuse it, it multi-layers itself. So anywhere on your body where there's abuse, try your feet and your hands, where you walk or you do something with, that's stratified. We're going to multi-layer it to give you protection from the outside. And then my favorite one is ciliated, pseudostratified, columnar epithelial. I have to throw one. I'll put all the terms together and see what we have.
Say it 5 times fast.
Oh. Ciliated means it has cilia attached to it. No brainer. Pseudostratified means it looks stratified, but it's not. It's pseudo. It's falsely stratified. Very good. Medical terminology will do that for you. And then columnar tells us it's column shaped, and it is an epithelium. So that's found in the respiratory tract.
Okay. Simple squamous lining most glands. Where columnar is the respiratory tract? Whereabouts cuboidal?
Cuboidal is
That was the
kidney
kidney, wasn't it?
tubules.
Kidneys?
Kidney tubules, yes.
Is that something you need to know?
Do what?
Is that like you need to know?
It'll be a lab question.
Okay.
Stratified.
And again, when we go over this in lab, I'll be telling you these same things again. So you'll have 2 sets of notes before it's over.
And before you test, you want 3 sets of notes.
Going for 3, huh?
Yeah.
Keratinized, typically are dead cells that are keratinized. When you develop a callus on your hand or your feet, everybody's feet has calluses on some point on them. We tend to not be perfect on our feet, so we walk to one side or the other, or the side of your toe or something rubs the shoe, and you get a callus. And the callus is cornified, so we have this keratinized, which is a protein that begins to implant into these cells. They harden and multi-layer to prevent, I mean, if it was just thin skin there, you'd just wear it raw all the time, you'd be bleeding all the time. So it thickens up to protect you. That's all it is. Epidermis replaces itself every 2 weeks. Now that's not to say that you need to take a shower every 2 weeks, because you're technically losing cells every time you take a shower or bath, but they say the entire epidermis is replaced every 2 weeks. You're not gonna stand there in the shower and your whole skin falls off and you grow one on. Now it reads in the zoology book that penguins shed all their feathers at once. You remember that in the zoology book? Oh, it's been last summer, so it's been too long. You remember that in the zoology book? Because we talked about it.
And then he
But
started
that's not
talking
true.
about his
Penguins don't
famous
stand there and
bird
become
where
naked.
the woman
Yeah, I can
beats
just
the
see a
hell out of
naked
man.
penguin out there.
You don't remember
Well,
that?
we should, about every 2 weeks we have new skin, worse than a snake. Lining of the stomach replaced every 2 to 3 days. Which one deals with the most harsh environment?
Stomach.
Yeah, stomach deals with a lot of acid. About, well, as we range from 1.5 to 2.5 in acid levels and pH scale. That's pretty acidic. You really stick your finger in 1.5, you may grow back a bone. I mean, that's getting real way down there. But you know, orange juice falls in the 2.5 to 3 range, so you borderline eating acid that'll eat you up all the way down. It's a little bit nutty, but that's the way the system works. Our fourth tissue is connective tissue. We'll look at several examples of this in lab. We have blood we'll look at. Lymph, don't have one. Bone's an easy one. Tendons connect muscle to muscle. Ligaments connect bone to bone, just as basic definitions. I could ask you that in lab. Here's some others we'll look at. We'll look at some areolar. We'll look at cartilage. We'll look at adipose. What's another name for adipose? Fat. Just good old fat. And we'll also ask, where does adipose begin to accumulate on any person? I get lots of good answers here. That's not a beginning. That's not a beginning. That's an eventual.
I feel like mine's a beginning.
I tell people that men especially are a lot like trees. We grow tall for a while and then commence to grow in circumference. And trees slow down the height and start growing this way with age. So, but no, around internal organs is where your first accumulation of fat will be, and normal and healthy is anywhere from 12 to about 20 to 22% fat. And most of that is internal, around your internal organs. Kidneys is really the first organ it starts around. And I'll probably ask you that in lab. From that point on, and it may take you quite a bit of your life. I mean, you may have a little baby fat growing up, and you lose that in your teenage years when you're active and out doing stuff. And then when that growth in height starts slowing down and growth in circumference starts, well, there's also something else that's really raging in the system, and that's called hormones. And in guys, testosterone gives us the midsection spare tire love handles, if you want to call them that way. And so the guy ends up growing up needing suspenders because he has no butt and he's all gut. So, none at all. Now, what do you think estrogen does to y'all, you ladies? Y'all even want to comment on that?
It's gonna make us crazy. That's false.
That's a whole nother chapter on when you say crazy. That's a psychology chapter toward the end that we need to start covering. You said one a while ago, somebody did.
Our bellies.
Hips, thighs,
Butt.
Back of the leg.
back of the, what, how about top of the foot? We're just gonna name it all here. Well, another one that's kind of left out is fat accumulation begins a lot of times in the breast area, and then hips.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with ability of producing milk, but it has a lot to do with size.
But when it
Now leave the butts out of it.
when men and women both start losing weight, the first place they lose weight is their face.
Face, and in women's case, a lot of times, first place is the breast.
Yes.
Maybe I need to let y'all lecture on this one. Y'all been doing more research than. All right, man, we're just about out of time. So these are some we'll look at in lab.
All right.
This is a test question in here. It's a good place to probably end right here at the bottom. Dentin is similar in composition to bone. It only gets harder when it's covered with enamel. Where would you find that? It's almost like a riddle. It's your tooth, yeah. And here's the test question. True or false? Dentin is like bone. It's true. Y'all are way too hesitant on such an easy question. Now, it's no trick. It's true. It's not every little single word that's here, but that's a true statement. Please don't miss that. That's an exact test question off the test. And the last thing here, I think, is skin. They're looking at it as an organ. Just mark that. We'll talk about the skin a little bit. We'll be over in chemistry when we come back on Wednesday. I'm going to give you Monday off. We've worked hard this week. You can go ahead.